Former world's top double tennis player Peng Shuai walked back to her story and also declared retirement. How credible is her word?
A San Francisco-grown Chinese-American girl, Eileen Gu, joined the Chinese Olympic team to compete against the U.S. Is it as innocuous as it seems?
And the former Secretary of the State, David Stilwell, is with us today and to share with us his observation. Welcome to Wei and Kathy Show. I'm your host, Wei Fang.
I'm Kathy Zhang.
All right, how's your weekend? And actually today we got three ladies, three female athletes story. Quite, amazing, incredible. Okay, we got a lot to share with you. And so two has to do with the Winter Olympics. Actually, two Chinese-American athletes joined China's team and compete against the U.S. And how to see that? It's just some innocuous move, or there's something more to that, or deeper than that. That's the main topic of today. And we have General David Stilwell tonight with us. Is a interview and to show you what his observation. But before that, let's look at Peng Shuai's story. As everybody should have known, Peng Shuai, the former top-ranked double players of the tennis, and dropped out of the public view late last year. Okay, so basically what happened is, you already know what happened. Let me just give you the most update. In the past weekend, Peng Shuai is again catching the world media's high attention. All right, so in that weekend, she dined with Thomas Bach, which is the IOC, International Olympics Committee's chairman, Thomas Bach, and also with the Kirsty Coventry, who is the Ethnic Association's former president, and they met together and then also have dinner together. In the meantime, and accompanied by a Chinese Olympic Committee official, she accepted the interview of a sports journal called, I don't know how to say that,
Equipe.
Okay, Le Equipe. It's an interview, okay, and she said three things in that interview, quite amazing, okay. First, she denied that she has ever disappeared. The second, she denied she was sexual harassed or abused. Third, she announced that she will terminate her professional tennis career. All right, so just back up a little bit. Last Thursday, the 2 days before the Thomas Bach's meeting with Peng Shuai, IOC, International Olympic Committee, issued a statement saying that if Peng Shuai requests the investigation of her charge against the former top Chinese CCP leader about her coerced sexual behavior, the IOC would support her. All right. So now it came to this interview, and the reporter from the French sports magazine asked her, "So why? So what have happened? How were you? What about the story of the sexual abuse?" And she said it does not exist. She said sexual assault. This is the original word. Okay, I never said that. Anyone made me submit to sexual assault. And then the reporter asked then why was your posting on the Weibo, the Chinese version of Facebook, okay? Why was that deleted? She said this way, okay? She said, I erased it. The reporter asked why. She said, because I wanted to. The obvious follow-up question would be, then why did you post it in the first place? For some reason, the reporter did not ask that question. By the way, every question to be asked has to be submitted for examination before that. All right. The reporter also asked her this question, whether she has been in trouble with the Chinese authorities since the post. This is her answer. You tell me how much you believe it. She said, quote, I was to say first of all that emotions, sports, and politics are three clearly separate things. My romantic problems, my private life should not be mixed with sports and politics. What do you think, Kathy?
Well, it's very
Spokesperson. This is a Democrat. I'm not talking about a diplomat. Diplomat Peng Shuai speaking. Of course.
in very Chinese style.
Yeah,
right?
and she, of course, you understand. She has, my sympathy, our sympathy, and she was under control. She is under control. That's why she has to say that. Reporter then asked what her life has been like since the November posting. This is we're talking about the November 3rd. She posted on the Weibo about her story, how she was sexually assaulted by the top Chinese, CCP leader, which is the vice premier, of the country. And her reply is this, quote, "It is as it should be, nothing special," end quote. So what do you think?
Well, obviously the interview was very much controlled. It's pre-screened questions, so any sensitive question won't be asked, and the answers are prepared very, really a formality. So, yeah.
And regarding that, her disappearance. So basically, after her posting on that day, November 3rd, she just disappeared from the public eyes for 2 weeks. Until November 21st, the Thomas Bach was arranged to have this meeting with her. That's how he showed up. So the reporter asked her that, like a Serena Williams and all the other top tennis players will show their support and ask, where is Peng Shuai? And this is her reply to the reporter, quote unquote, quote, "I would like to know why so much worry. I never disappeared. It is simply that many people, like my friends, and among them, those from IOC, send me messages, and it was completely impossible to respond to many messages." Okay, and she said, as to my close friend I've been keeping close contact with, I talked with them, I replied their email, and I also talked to WTA, which is the Women's Tennis Association, which is the only sports organization that openly severed the tie with the CCP, citing their concern over the safety of Peng Shuai. So that's basically the interview. Mm-hmm. And then no sexual assault, I did not disappear, and I no longer play tennis anymore. So what do you think? Tap up your explanation of what's the context of her accepting that type of interview. As you know, so she's a 36-year-old, okay? Serena Williams, she's a 41-year-old, and she's still playing tennis. Okay, if you recall the former champion like Martina Navratilova, and she retired at the age of 50. Mm-hmm. So a women tennis player can really play, long time. But anyway, and when Peng Shuai did not show up in the Australia Open, people were asking, where is she? She can have this online meeting with Thomas Bach, and accompanied by Chinese government official. She could never go to Australia, and any place outside of China. All right. And by the way, the country really has a history of disappearing people who run afoul with of its leaders. And so besides Peng Shuai, let me just give you a few more examples. Jack Ma, as you know, Jack Ma, if we have the photo there. Jack Ma is the founder of the Alibaba, right? The number one Chinese e-commerce site. And in October 2020, she, in her open speech, she criticized Chinese government's being too conservative. Then he disappeared from the public site. How long? 2 months. By the way, Jack Ma is very high profile. He like to speak things, and he's everywhere, and people give him camera and give him, pictures, and he really likes to travel and talk and things like that. For 2 months, he disappeared. And when he show up again, he just say something. He basically say no explanation to my disappearing. And now the Jack Ma already declared retirement, also retirement, okay? And he's show up in public scenes very, very rarely. Nobody knows what's his condition and his whereabout. This is first example. The second is Fan Bingbing. For any Chinese, they know Fan Bingbing is one of the most renowned actress in China. In the 2018, when he just suddenly disappeared for about 4 months. His Weibo, basically, is like his Facebook, stopped updating, and his company in the Beijing, all the office was just cleared out. When she reappear again, she apologized publicly for her tax evasion. Okay, she was fined about 130 million US dollar. And another person is Meng Hongwei, and Meng Hongwei was the deputy minister of the Public Security Bureau, Public Security Ministry, and also he's the chairman of the Interpol. Okay, Interpol, International Police Organization, Interpol. And when he returned to China in 2018, he also disappeared for several weeks. Finally, he was declared being arrested and put in jail. But his wife was left behind in France, and his wife completely denied all those charges. He said those are untruthful, and he was cleansed, and because he wanted to push for reform with his position and his his status. And and we talk about the two Canadian, right? The Michael Kovrig, and he's the former diplomat, and also the businessman Michael Spanville of the Canada. They just disappeared. Chinese government never said we arrest them. They just disappeared. When the Meng Wanzhou, this is Huawei's CFO was released, and they were released. So this is CCP's way. They put you away without giving any explanation until you cave in, until you surrender, until you collaborate with them. Then they let you out.
Yeah, so that's the fate of female athlete Peng Shuai in China, right? So now next we'll bring you the stories of two Chinese American athletes, female athletes, who reportedly renounced their citizenship of the United States and representing the People's Republic of China in this Winter Olympics. So how's their fate gonna be? So one of them is actually was born and raised here in San Francisco, Eileen Gu. Eileen Gu is a skier who is very talented. Obviously, she started to ski at a very young age and started to compete in international competitions at the age of 13 as an adult, right? Yeah. So
let's give a little bit background. How about her mother?
Oh, yeah, I will. We will get into that.
I'll wait for that. Yes.
Yeah. So this is one. The other one is Beverly Zhu, or Yi Zhu, her Chinese name. She's also born in California, in Southern California, figure skater. She also reportedly, renounced her citizenship of the United States and representing China in this Olympics. So interesting thing is I just wanted to give you the most updates. The two of them had a high hope of winning medals, but each of them actually just had a pretty dramatic performance at the Olympic Games already. So Eileen Gu, actually, she's in the hope of winning 3 medals.
Gold medals
yes. In the ski competition. But actually on Monday, when she was competing to qualify for the big air freestyle final, she actually lost a ski on her second jump, which could jeopardize her chance to make the final. But, she made it because at her third jump, it was pretty solid. So pushed her up to the 5th place and secured her place in the finals. And Beverly Zhu wasn't that lucky. She fell twice during the women's short program team event, crashed into the wall during her routine, and then fell again during the short performances. And she was blasted in the Chinese social media. We'll talk about more later. So let's tell their backgrounds, because I think it's worth knowing that, and then it will lead to our discussion. Eileen Gu, she was born in San Francisco. Now she's 18, okay, and she was raised in a very rich area in San Francisco, the Sea Cliff area. In her room, she can see the Golden Gate. All right, and she's graduated from San Francisco University High School. It's a very expensive private school. Annual tuition is more than $54,000. And so arguably she's the best female freestyle skier in the world. And so as like right after she earned her first World Cup win in Italy in 2019, a few months later, at that time she's only 15. A few months later, she announced in a tweet that she has decided to compete for China in the 2020 Winter Olympics. So why? Yeah, we will talk about that. But we mentioned about her mom. She actually was born to a mom who immigrated from China, and obviously she has an American dad, and her mom graduated from Beijing University, which is a prestigious university in China. Her dad graduated from Harvard. It was reportedly her grandfather also graduated from Stanford. And her mom's parents graduated from prestigious universities from China. So it seems, she's raised in a very, intellectual family.
And also very elite family. So basically, there's no detailed information about where, who her mother exactly was. Yes, but she grew up in the region, like west of the Tiananmen Square, which is for the Chinese CCP elite people. So her mother could be some type of a prince. We don't know, okay? We don't have that information.
One thing we do know is that actually on her LinkedIn, she's an investor. She owns her own investment company and a specialist in investing in China. So if people know about that, in order to have, she's just devoted, her business devoted into investment in China, you have to have relationships in China, especially with the government.
So just give you a little backdrop. I'm not saying for certain, and her mother's name is Gu Yan. Okay, I don't know who she is. I have no information about that, but I just want to tell you one phenomenon that may fit in here, may or may not fit in here. So for CCP officials, believe it or not, you can type up if you don't believe me and raise your question. For CCP officials, they have power there, they have money there, okay, they have their career there, but in their mind, the safe place would be not in China, but in the US, because the US is so open and is so tolerant and is so free, okay? So when they got their money and through corruption or whatever and bribery, they move the money to the US, all right? And then they move their family to the US, they stay here. So actually the most elite CCP official and their relatives, they have their family in this country. They come here, live a very good life because they have a lot of money, they can easily go back anytime and make a lot of money there. So they have the best of both countries. They got the freedom here and to do whatever they want. Also, they got the privilege in China. I'm not saying that Gu Yan is one type, but from that type, okay, it depends on in-depth investigation. But just judging from her experience, as reported by this long investigative reporting by the economics, right? And it shows me that she really carry a lot of traces of that type of people. I just want to insert that.
Yeah, so maybe we just continue to present you more facts. One thing is it seems, we cannot be certain the two, Eileen Gu's parents probably, separated or divorced, and she bears the last name of her mom. So then you may wonder in 2019, at the age of 15, why Eileen Gu decided to just to compete for China in the 2020 Olympics. And officially, she said on her Instagram, she said that the opportunity to help inspire millions of young people, where my mom was born during the 2020 Beijing Olympic Winter Game, is 22 when Beijing Winter Olympic Games is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to help promote the sport I love. So basically, she said, I love this sport, and I wanted to promote it in China. Actually, at that time, there weren't many of the women skiers, especially in China. So, she justified her motivation. And in an interview with AP last winter, she said, I'd have a much greater impact in China than in the United States. And that's ultimately why I made that decision. And in an interview with the New York Times, she explained her decision to pass on the questioning, to answering any question about China. She said, there's no need to be divisive. I think everything I do is all about inclusivity, and it's all about making everybody feel as connected as possible, because obviously the questions were it's not even about Peng Shuai or the human rights, but they've been very careful. It was reported by New York Times that the daughter and the mom actually didn't want to accept the interview unless the questions were pre-screened. So her mom, Gu Yan, is now 58 years old, says she will not be willing to talk about her daughter unless the New York Times avoid China-related political issues and allowed her to review the article before it's published. Yeah, and it was the same thing for the report by the Economist, the long article. They said the same thing. And the New York Times declined her offer and therefore did not conduct a formal interview with her. But the sports agent for Gu Yan and Eileen Gu is called Tom Yaps. He admitted that they were concerned about how the New York Times story would be interpreted in China, thus have a negative impact on them. So let's see how, like in terms of why she wanted to represent PRC instead of United States, and let's see how the Chinese media reported. So I found one reporting saying that the reporter asked Eileen Gu why she chose to fight for China. Eileen Gu said that she has been living in Beijing with her mom since she was a child, and that she had not only learned to play table tennis in Beijing, but that her mom had also enrolled her in a very short training courses, which allowed her to make many good friends. So she thinks she's actually a Beijing Hutong girl. Hutong is the alley in Beijing, very traditional, typical living there. She said, I'm a Beijing Hutong girl. So when she saw that she finally made it in skiing because of the training in the United States, she wants to represent China and show the world what a Chinese athlete looks like. That's reported by the Chinese media. Then the Chinese media had this comment, her Beijing phrase of Hutong girl brought tears to the eyes and showed that this child of Chinese descent has a strong Chinese patriotic feelings. So there you can see how, we don't know, because you can compare her answers to different media. And obviously in the Chinese media, they do have an agenda to really show how she switched her allegiance, shows her patriotic sentiment to China. So actually, exactly why and how she switched the allegiance, the Yahoo News flagged a now deleted passage on her Red Bull athlete profile and explained how at age of 15, she decided to give up her American passport and naturalize as a Chinese citizen in order to compete for China in Beijing, because Chinese law doesn't recognize dual nationality. But this paragraph has since been taken off the website. So, but Eileen Gu certainly has not ditched America. She has been accepted to Stanford, just deferred admission for a year. And also another thing is she, in March of 2021, she said she applied for a presidential plan, like a scholarship. But she wasn't eventually admitted. But in order to apply for this presidential scholarship, she has to be either a green card holder or
U.S. citizen.
U.S. citizen. So that really raised the question. So we talked about her mom, right? And according to someone who's familiar with the mom, his name is Mike Henley. He's the head of school at Wayne's East Mountain Academy in Oregon, which is a training facility for Olympic skiers. And Mike Henley said, all roads to Eileen Gu go through Yan, the mom. And his impression on the mom is that Yan is a very pleasant, but one of the most intense human being I have ever met in my life. She smiles and tells you how great you are, but then you find out after the fact what the requests are. She loves her daughter and wants her daughter to get priority. And according to Henley, he said that these sports are very expensive, the ski sports. So many of the Americans asked for favors. Gu Yan, the mom, was willing to pay, which is very rare in the action sports industry. She paid for coaching and the travel. So obviously
Money is not the issue.
Money is not an issue for her. And then, Henley said Eileen Gu is the golden star for the country with the fastest growing economy, which is in a lot of people's impression. But whether that's true or not, people can just judge by themselves. And he said she can be the Tony Hawk of winter sports in China, which means will be a lot of commercial interest and economic incentive for Eileen Gu in China. In America, Gu sponsor including like the Red Bulls, Cadillac, and Victoria's Secret. But those big names really is nothing by comparing to the deals she has been made in China, which the state-run broadcaster CCTV has described her as the perfect girl next door, and she has landed over 20 endorsement deals. And each of them would be at least cost about $2.5 million, according to CampaignAsia.com. So, and actually, she was in the picture with Xi Jinping last year, which she never mentioned about it.
That's in 2019.
2019.
Let me just insert a little bit. So after that, Italy World Championship, and when all her U.S. team colleagues and come back to Utah, which is another game, and she actually headed to Beijing. It was a secretly arranged meeting with General Secretary Xi Jinping, along with other athletes, not just her. So basically, the CCP was arranging for a group of, foreign-born athletes to go over there to Beijing, and then met with Xi Jinping. And Xi Jinping said, what he said is like,
just be loyal to your motherland.
And love your motherland and help with the motherland's rejuvenation. Okay.
Yeah, because I think the CCP government they have been starting a naturalization program to just naturalize those foreign-born Chinese athletes.
And you read the report, and you think, so basically she chose to align with China, and she got naturalized, just like somebody got naturalized into the U.S. No, not so simple. But let's hold the breath here, okay? Let's continue the story until we visit this key issue. The most key issue with the story, we'll be talking about that a bit later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's what, there's according to New York Post, a former X-Game athlete who asked not to be identified said in China, Gu will be supported by the government, and the amount of money, the amount of support she gets from China will be so much higher than she would get in America. But on the other hand, in China, all those athletes, they have to stay silent most of the time. According to the Economist report, Gu's decision to represent China has amplified her fame and wealth, but it has also made her a showpiece for an increasingly repressive government that require one thing in return, which is silence. Gu and her mom declined the request for interview for the Economist story as well, the same as the New York Times story.
Yeah.
And again, her sports agent, Tom Yaps, said that the family would not take part unless they could review the entire article before publication to guarantee there's no criticism of China appeared in the text.
Yeah. So this is the key sentence. Okay. His rep said, okay.
He said that I understand how unconventional a request that is, but political sensitivity were making them very cautious. And Gu Yan, he told me, feared that if Eileen's participates in an article that has 2 paragraphs critical of China and human rights, that would put her in jeopardy over there. One thing and a career is ruined.
Yeah, so they really know how CCP works, and they know where to take a caution. And in the meantime, indeed, we just remember that just almost at the same time, 2019, when the Houston Rocket, right, the general manager spoke out on Hong Kong, just tweet, fight for freedom, stand with Hong Kong. So CCP, they just stopped the broadcasting in China of the Houston Rocket, and then all the NBA store removed all Rocket merchandise, and the China censors even scrubbed the Rockets from the daily sports reports. It's like the Houston Rocket has never existed. All right, it cost NBA hundreds of millions of dollars. So apparently, Gu Yan, her mother, and they really know this very well. Mm-hmm. So she has to. Every report about her, interviewing the girl or the mother, have to make sure that no criticism of Chinese government was there. In the meantime, and this girl was quite a woke girl, right? She advocates empowerment for women and the Black Lives Matters when she was in just high school here in San Francisco. But when her fellow female athlete like Peng Shuai, as we just reported to you, and she actually didn't say anything about that.
Yeah, and she, just tried to avoid the questions. So, and the one may just still press the question, right? Exactly, has she really denounced her citizenship in the United States? So actually, Eileen Gu told ESPN in a January 2020 interview a year ago, actually 2 years ago. She said that since I was little, I've always said when I'm in the United States, I'm American. But when I'm in China, I'm Chinese. And through her agent, the Tom Yaps guy, Gu declined to comment on her citizenship status. She has never confirmed whether she renounced her American passport, and that there's no official record of her renouncing her U.S. citizenship. Gu has never publicly shared whether she has, renounced either. And on March, as I mentioned before, on March 1st, 2021, she posted on Weibo, which is a Chinese social media equivalent to Twitter, that she applied for the U.S. Presidential Scholars Program in 2021, which is only open to U.S. citizens or permanent residents.
Yeah, I want to call it out here. Okay, so what Kathy just described, you may not feel is that relevant. Okay, naturalization, meaning become a Chinese citizen so that it can compete for Team China, right? And being an American versus being a Chinese is day and night, is 2 different worlds. Okay, and if this girl loves China so much and is willing to relinquish her U.S. citizenship and join China, I have only respect for a different opinion. Okay, she apparently holds different opinion than I, but if she or people around her claim that she gave it up, she has already given up U.S. citizenship to join Team China. But she has not. I think just reported to you from China, she remained to be a U.S. citizen, having the protection of the U.S. government and the U.S. Constitution and the freedom of U.S. That's the big issue here, which I will come back and then talk about at the end of it. This is the biggest, the pivotal or the most key issue here.
Yeah, because everybody knows the PRC, CCP government, they don't accept dual citizenship.
Yeah, so in theory, if you join Team China, you have to relinquish U.S. citizenship.
Yeah, but would PRC, the government, just give her exception? We don't know, right? But obviously, as I described, she had never officially just faced this question directly. So actually, it really such things really kind of caused her peers to question a lot. A former Winter X Game gold medalist for the United States women's team, Jen Haddock, she said, "It's not my place to judge," right? Eileen's from California, not from China. Her decision to ski for China seems opportunistic. Okay, and Jen said, "I cannot speak to what Eileen's Chinese heritage means to her, and she has every right to do what she believes is best for her career." But she said, Eileen Gu became the athlete she is because she grew up in the United States, where she had access to the premier training grounds and the coaching that as a female she might not have had in China. So Jen Haddock said that, "I think she would be a different skier if she grew up in China." This makes makes her very sad.
Mm-hmm. And if you read the Chinese media, they made a documentary for her, and then Chinese people think she has already been nationalized. But wherever she go, according to all the reports that I can find, wherever she go, she refused to give a clear answer whether she's still a U.S. citizen or not. Okay, there's no answer there. But Chinese people already thought she's a Chinese. But she refused to give clear, relinquish the U.S. citizenship. Again, so she got the best of both worlds, and very possibly under a sheer of lie.
Yeah, so let's shift attention to the other athlete, the Beverly Zhu, or Yi Zhu. She's 19 years old, born in Southern California, a figure skater. She has also said to renounce her U.S. citizenship to compete for China at this Olympic game. But she wasn't so lucky, right? She fell twice in the short game. And then the Chinese social media app, Weibo, on there just exploded to the point that they had to deactivate it. Okay. But in some of the comments, it's just no sympathy to her, and some people even just say, it's such a disgrace, and some even just questioning naturalize her as Chinese, saying that maybe your performance is so ridiculous, and she said people said, "How dare you skate for China?" All right, so she's not appreciated. One netizen referred to her father, Zhu Songchun, and saying that congratulations the Chinese skating team on their significant contribution to the computer field. So why is that? Her father, Zhu Songchun, let's talk about him a little bit because it's pretty revealing. He's supposedly a top artificial intelligence expert and a professor in UCLA. She returned to China in 2020 to head a major research institute. So Zhu Songchun, he's a native from Hubei province. Hubei province is where the city of Wuhan is.
The infamous city where the virus came from.
Right, and so he's a renowned expert in computer vision, statistical, and applied mathematics. And artificial intelligence is also his specialty. He is currently a professor in the Department of Statistics and Computing at the University of California, Los Angeles, and the director of Center for Vision, Cognition, Learning, and Autonomy at UCLA. In 2021, in 2011, he became the IEEE Fellow, which is with the Institute of Electric and Electronics Engineering, won MAR Prize for 3 times. And then he founded an AI startup in Los Angeles in 2017, and the next year he moved it to Guangzhou, China. So in September 2020, Zhu returned to China to join Beijing University to lead its Institute for Artificial Intelligence. And guess what? You may already have this question. Is he a member of the Chinese government's 1,000 Talents Plan? Yes, I found it. There is a name list of the 1,000 Talent Plan. It's only up to 2013. So there was a reporting saying that he probably joined the plan in around 2010. So what does that all tell us, right? I sat down, I actually interviewed General David Stilwell earlier today, who is the former Deputy Secretary of State in the Trump administration, who's responsible for the Asian Pacific affairs. So first of all, I just asked General Stilwell, what is his take on these incidences, where these like the next generation of the Chinese immigrants representing the PRC instead of United States?
First off, it's not unusual for American athletes to go play for their native countries. Basketball is one of the bigger ones. A lot of NBA players will go play for their native, Serbia, Latvia, or wherever. So that in itself isn't, I don't think, concerning. The thing that got my attention on this was the fact that they said, and again, the reports are kind of sketchy, and communications with the athletes in Beijing is unnecessarily difficult right now. Nonetheless, reports say that they had to give up their American citizenship. One said that. Others said they didn't talk about their American citizenship, but they had to address their Chinese citizenship. And so they forced them to get Chinese maybe passports. It's all very unclear, but it raises a number of questions about what they had to do to become part of the Chinese Olympic team. It also raises questions in my mind about the Chinese 1,000 Talents program. We know that they're using that in our universities. Charles Lieber, a MIT or Harvard scholar, has been recently brought to court, and I think convicted of accepting 1,000 Talents money for his own purposes to give away research to the Chinese side. So whether using 1,000 Talents to bring in American research or to bring in American athletic talent, that's just not how things are done in the larger world. And the third thing is, as soon as I read that, if you're 60 years old or older, you remember the Cold War pretty clearly. And I know you're too young to remember this, but a lot of us do remember when the Olympics were a major source of ideological conflict. The 1956 Melbourne Olympics, you had, there's a movie came out called Blood in the Water, where the Soviets had just invaded Hungary. And Hungary was one of the better water polo teams in the Olympics. And they beat the Soviets 4-0, but they got beat up in the process. So this friendly competition in the spirit of peace and goodwill that we hear coming out of Beijing brings to mind issues like the Hungarian water polo team getting beat up in what was supposed to be a non-ideological, non-political sporting event. And one other thing, when you talk about giving up your American passport, which again, it's unclear as to what the two women had to do to be able to compete on the Chinese side. It also brings to mind another Cold War story about a guy named Charles Robert Jenkins, who defected to North Korea from South Korea. He was a U.S. soldier on the demilitarized zone. In 1965, he walked across into North Korea, believing the propaganda that he'd be treated better in North Korea, and basically defected from the U.S. He quickly came to regret that decision, and he was only released in 2004, 40 years later. 40 years of being held in the worst possible conditions in North Korea. And I hope that these athletes haven't made bad choices in the way of giving up their American passports for the chance to participate on the Chinese team.
Yeah. So, and actually, I also shared with the General Stilwell that Zhu Songchun, right, the father of Beverly Zhu, is in fact a member of the 1,000 Talent Plan, and what his viewpoint on that.
The key problem here is a closed authoritarian system in competition with an open, democratic, market-based system. Our system is vulnerable to these things, and individuals will prioritize their own personal betterment in terms of financial status over any national security concerns. And this is a very easy formula that we've seen repeated again and again. And honestly, the only way you can prevent that in the future is to create laws against it. We need the Congress to get involved. There has been, on the FBI side, there has been enforcement on the 1,000 Talents programs, people who are hiding the money that they're receiving, who aren't telling. Look, a lot of these people are receiving U.S. government money to do this research, and then they're taking the results of those research funded by the American taxpayer, and they're getting paid by the PRC to hand it off to the PRC, which in many cases that technology or research ends up being used against us, AI, military hardware, and the like. So this is just common sense. And Kathy, we have to remember what the Cold War was like, remember what this ideological competition was like, and do our best to defend ourselves for once, because we have yet. I mean, since we said the word rebalance in 2012, here we are a decade later, and we still really haven't girded up for competition. We have to start soon. Maybe this is the event that will do it.
Yeah, so the story about Charles Robert Jenkins, who defected from the United States to North Korea, I think it's very interesting. I didn't know about that until now. But one stark difference is right now, for example, especially for Eileen Gu, she has lucrative commercial interests and the financial benefits for going to China, representing China. So I just asked General Stilwell, what does he made of it?
It's a really good question, and I think the lesson is you can't believe the propaganda. Americans are used to having information from anywhere they want to get it, and they are allowed to make up their own minds. But if you're, reading a lot of the propaganda coming to us from the PRC, through Xinhua, through CCTV, through people that are living in the United States, posing as journalists and other things, or statements from the government in Beijing, if you're believing that without approaching it with a very skeptical eye, you're not getting the full story, and you're being duped. And so it sounds great. You can come to China, you can live free, you can make a lot of money, and you can be back amongst your own people. And these very, unfortunately, racial arguments as well are coming to the fore. In the U.S., race really has no meaning as a country of immigrants. China is a country that is made up primarily of people who grew up in that region. In the United States, and I realize this is a tough subject, but nonetheless, if you live in the U.S. and you live in China, you don't understand real racism until you've lived in China. And you definitely understand what it's like to call people from Tibet animals, to treat Uyghurs as though they're somehow all terrorists, with the complete blessing of the government. Sure, we have our problems here in the U.S., but to compare what we do here in the U.S. to what goes on in China is complete nonsense. Someone just did that recently, and someone at a high level who really should know better made that comparison, and I'm telling you, there's no comparison. So my point is you have these great promises and all those things, but until you've actually lived overseas, and especially until you've lived in the PRC, you just don't get it. You don't understand what a onerous and oppressive authoritarian surveillance state is like, where everything you do is being watched and questioned and perhaps used against you outside of a court of law. There, you don't have legal protections there. So, but I am getting off the main point. The main point is the Olympics, and PRC's proven will or desire to win at all costs, regardless of the rules. And so now you're seeing a guy named Vincent Zhou, a skater, who somehow tested positive for COVID. This guy was in medal contention. He easily could have medaled. I want to be careful in what I suggest, but given the fact that over time we now know that when the PRC says something, and you compare it to what it actually does, very rarely are those the same thing. I first, when I saw that, wondered who did the tests, who did the PCR tests on Mr. Joe, who did the testing, right, and the results and the interpretation of those results. And my guess, having seen this act before, is those things are held in tight control by the government. The International Olympic Committee hasn't proven up to its requirements to keep the games fair. We've seen statements out of the IOC, lavishing praise on Xi Jinping in the opening game, the opening ceremonies. So now the IOC has proven it as well to be not doing its job, is to be a neutral convener of the games and there to make sure it's all being done fairly. It's going to be hard to live that down, and I hope they are actually doing their best to keep these games fair. I just say, given the history and the track record, it is not unreasonable to question how those COVID tests were conducted.
Yeah, and then for young Americans like Eileen Gu and Beverly Zhu, they actually have to basically censor their own speeches in order to be competing for China. So what would be the impact?
Parents can tell their children whatever they want. And, it's concerning that the people who fled China, I think Ms. Gu's mom actually left China after Tiananmen, are now defending that same regime. Again, let's wait till the facts are in. So I don't know that this is true, but sure, it's what it sounds like. That's one thing. And we'll let them talk to that when they talk to the press, when they're allowed to speak more openly when they come back to the U.S. Although they're probably going to be reluctant to do that because there's financial and monetary issues at stake here. To answer your question here in a second, but that's the interesting thing about how the PRC leverages its economic force. Oftentimes, if you're a small country, New Zealand, Australia, Lithuania, they will say, we're going to basically embargo all of Australian coal and iron ore and lobster and wine. That would devastate the Australian economy. But more often than not, is they withhold the promise of some sort of financial support. And it's really interesting to see, they actually never have to come through with these promises. They simply tell universities that, if you speak out, it's going to be really hard for us to send students your way. There's no students coming right now. And so there's this potential, there's this promise of having some $300,000 scholarship full-ride Chinese students coming through, or grants and other things. So that's a difficult problem. But the bigger problem here on censorship is when our own government does it. And we have people in our government, particularly in the Congress, someone from near where you live, who has said, you don't speak out against anything that you believe in these Olympics because the U.S. isn't going to be able to come save you. Of course we can save them. I mean, if we wanted to, we could definitely make a deal that the PRC would definitely lose. And think of the catastrophic impact on the reputation of the PRC if they started taking Olympians hostage because they are exercising their right to free speech. There's never been Olympics where you weren't allowed to say anything until this one, and that's not who we are. We don't tell our people to self-censor. I'm really disappointed now.
Yeah. So, is there any other takeaways?
Well, I do think that the entire activity. I'm seeing it from my friends who don't necessarily have the same time in China that I do, are asking a lot of questions about the opening ceremonies, the clearly scripted, propaganda ministry scripted lines that the IOC and the NBC narrators are reading, and you're thinking, that's not true. And why are you praising a regime that you all know is not democratic, is treating its own people very badly? So, in all cases like this, especially in the recent few years, people are beginning to see through the facade. They hear the words, but they're actually looking and judging for themselves, using their own minds to compare to the words and deeds, and they're saying, that doesn't resonate. All the things we're hearing doesn't make sense. So if this serves to get people to question more and more the propaganda coming out of Xinhua, CCTV, CGTN, and all the rest, that's a significant victory, because they will continue to question these things. as they discover that they aren't untrue. Last thing is, I'm again very disappointed in our own university's failure to uphold the highest standards of academic integrity and free speech. This is what they used to actually bank on. You could think or say or do anything in a classroom so long as you could validate it and back it up with facts, right? And now there's a story that George Washington University, somebody posted, I think the artist posted some posters. Is it Bai Dao Cai? He's an artist who made posters of the Olympics. One of them is a Chinese hockey player checking a Tibetan monk into the boards, or snowboarding on a surveillance camera. I'll send you the link, and you might want to put that up. But he had these things on display, I think, at George Washington University, and the leadership at George Washington University told them to take them down. What happened to free speech and open conversation and intellectual pursuit? You're watching what's going on with Joe Rogan and Spotify. You've got 1960s folk artists like Neil Young and Joni Mitchell, whose entire fortunes were made on the idea of, speaking out and being activists. And these people are saying that you can't let Joe Rogan speak publicly. Whether Joe Rogan is right or not, he's an American with the right to say whatever he wants, so long as he's not creating, negative outcomes, which he, as far as I can tell, is not. But isn't it funny how the roles are reversed now? These people who were solid advocates in your neighborhood, they're in Berkeley and Haight-Ashbury and all these other places, of free speech, and they benefited from that, are now actively squashing ideas that they don't like. That's too much like the Chinese communist system for my liking. I hope we can stop this. Very bad idea.
Very normal, actually. When in the 1940s, when the nationalist CCP tried to upend the nationalist party, and they basically promote democracy across the board until they got the power. Then they shut down everything. Mm-hmm. Use the freedom to attack freedom.
Yeah.
Use democracy to attack democracy.
Yeah, whenever it's not according, do not agree with their rhetoric, they will use their freedom to crush your freedom. One thing that General Stilwell mentioned at the last question, she pointed out how an organization, we wanted to just to tell a little bit more about it. It's called the China Students and the Scholar Association.
ACSSA.
Yeah, so it's all around the country in most of the universities here, believe it or not. So,
just mind you, okay, in most Chinese American universities, this Chinese association all carry the same name. You think is that just coincidence? Because they all come from the party, come from the Chinese government, okay, administered by a foreign regime. Our student association in our university.
Yeah, so a lot of people are not aware of that. So General Stilwell actually sent me a follow-up email. He really wanted to, explain more clearly. And he said, and that's how the whole thing, how he looked at it. For the first one, some in the United States government and at least one human rights organizations, we know that, right, told American athletes to self-censor because the CCP takes hostages and the United States may not be able to do anything about it. Then he said that this actually means the PRC is a very dangerous place to be in, and it seeks to export its authoritarian government to other countries since democracy is a direct threat to the CCP. And second, so why should the OIC, the Olympic International Committee,
IOC,
International Olympic Committee allow the games to be played there? And then, according to General Stilwell, there are reports that 2 American athletes have become naturalized citizens, as we talked about, of the PRC, but he said only 1,400 people from around the world become PRC citizens last year. And it means, China really builds a wall to keep people inside. By comparison, roughly 700,000 people become American citizens.
700,000 Chinese people.
Chinese people? No. Generally,
okay.
yeah.
Okay.
700,000.
Naturalized into American citizen each year. Yes.
And, he said that we build walls to keep people out.
Yeah,
So,
okay.
yeah, that's, the data tells.
Yeah, thank you for staying with us. I think it's been too long, and appreciate you're still here. And I really want to summarize my observation here. Okay, so first, this girl,
Beverly
right?
Gu.
She failed, and they really just dump on her. And the fans in China, because what they see these two ladies as useful fools. When they're not useful, they're gonna laugh at them. Okay, they don't appreciate their so-called patriotism. But is it really? And Kathy just reported to you about 1,400 naturalized people, okay, into Chinese citizen. But this may not be the case here, okay? So just let's dial back a little bit. Just dial back for 40 years, before 1980, okay? So what's the difference between US and Soviet Union? And between that pair and today, US versus China, right? So basically the CCP is only more ferocious, more belligerent, and a more powerful economy, and before they show all this, more cunning. Okay, they hide their intention and cover the wolf head with the sheepskin for 40 years and fool us into believing in them. But it is a more dangerous opponent or enemy than the Soviet Union. So back then, 40 years ago, when this thing happened, okay, American run over to join Soviet Union team is called a defection. Nowadays, defection has no consequence. Okay, it's seen as just personal choice. But if this country are really at war together, it's not today yet. But you envision 5 years or 10 years down the road, it is just like that. So essentially, it is a defection, but with no consequence. Okay, why? Defection without consequence is the reason for the defection to happen. Okay, what do I mean? Because America is open, is tolerant. America doesn't mind its individual citizen to choose to compete for their motherland. Motherland nation. But in China, these two ladies can go there, get the endorsement of the top leader, the supreme leader, and then make tons of money over there, and then so they without giving up their U.S. citizenship, okay? So they want to eat the cake on both ends, because there's really no consequence, right? If you do this type of defection, U.S. won't do anything. So to them, it's like, why not? There's no downside. We just move over there, and even they have not, in my judgment, most likely they have not even relinquished their American citizenship. And they can go there, get best everything. They can still come back to this country, attend Stanford University, and anywhere they want. They got the best of both sides because we don't care, all right? But they are the tool. They become the useful fool of the Chinese government, the regime, and to serve America's enemies' purpose. Okay, so in short, for people like them, whether they are still a U.S. citizen or not is a big deal. Okay, it's a big, huge deal. Because remember, when they went over there, joined the Team China, perceiving there's no consequence. If they lost their U.S. citizen, that is some consequence. If that is the consequence, 99, maybe 100% of Chinese American won't do that kind of thing. I mean, Chinese American people similar to them won't do that thing because now they have to give something. They won't give.
Yeah, would they really sacrifice their citizenship of the United States for that? Well, some may, right? We cannot
1% or below, okay?
Right.
Because just think about somebody you run into and just tell you, I love socialism. I love, just even out everything. I love whatever characteristic of China or the communism or the socialism. You just tell them, how about just move over there? Move to Cuba, move to Venezuela, move to China. Tell that to the Chinese American people who love CCP. If you just ask them their question, they will shut up right away.
Yeah, and I wanted to read a quote from this Charles Robert Jenkins, who defected to North Korea. He wrote a memoir. The name is called To Tell the Truth, U.S. Army Deserter to North Tells It All. And he wrote, I was so ignorant. I never knew that the country I would temporarily take refuge in was a monstrous prison. that cannot be understood using common sense. For almost everyone, North Korea is like an Italian's pit that once trapped, one can never escape again forever.
Yeah, that's it. And if this Beverly girl, and this Elaine have nothing against you, if you love the regime so much, just do an honest job. Give up your U.S. citizenship and join China. And 20 years later, you tell us, report to us, give us a scorecard of how you feel about that. Okay, and that would be a very honest question. Every person who can get in front of these two ladies should ask them the question: do you use a Chinese passport? And ask for their answer. Okay, and I think that's the ultimate answer to this. We don't want people who tell lie and have the best of both sides. That's dishonest. That's not truthful. That's a shame. That should not be a good behavior of a good citizen, let alone an outstanding athlete. So that's my ending word.
Yeah, and I
what do you think?
Yeah, the more dire thing is, if we just allow, of course they have their own choices, but if the United States just allow such things to continue to happen, just like we said, there's no consequences, then, it would really impact on other people, right? Everybody just think that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
You just agree with the communist regime, and then you can seemingly can get the best of both worlds.
And so I have one suggestion for the U.S. government. If ever, they got a chance to listen to my word, let me just read it to you. One sentence, they can fix this issue, this modern time defection issue, okay? Our State Department only needs to issue one simple statement saying this: since the PRC requires athletes to give up U.S. citizenship when they acquire Chinese citizenship, we understandably and accordingly revoke their U.S. citizenship. That simple policy will prevent 99, if not 100%, of Chinese Americans' so-called defection in the future. And I hope they can hear me, and eventually they can act on it. That's really protect our nation and protect the integrity of our citizens. All right, that's all about it, I think.
That's all for today.
Thank you
it's
for
pretty long.
With us. Yeah, it's important talk. Thank you for going through this with us. And take care, and until next time.
Right, good night.
Wednesday, same time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.